We all know the Nile carved Sudan's history, shaping kingdoms and trade routes. But Sudan also hides volcanic highlands, crystalline crater lakes, and coral cities beneath the Red Sea. Imagine Jebel Mara's hidden caldera forests, hosting species nowhere else on Earth, and Swakin's reefs cloaking centuries-old shipwrecks in living coral. Stay with me and you'll see dunes that sang and Nile cataracts that defy belief. Jebel Shad rises as one of Sudan's rare wave-carved sandstone monoliths, its layers like frozen ocean swells. Do you know Jebel Shad preserves fossilized ripple marks and shell fragments that prove ancient seas once lapped here? Visitors often expect empty rock and find instead hidden alcoves, ochre veins, and pockets of salt crystals. The wind scours the softer strata, sculpting ribs and hollows that catch dramatic shadows at dawn. Locals tell stories of ancient caravans navigating by these silhouettes, linking Jebel Shad to distant oases. Those trade routes threaded the same landscape that fed empires along the Nile and the ruined cities beyond. Geologists visiting the cliff faces point out cross-bedding and mineral lenses that whisper of shifting currents and ancient deserts. Between the weathered spines run narrow gullies, where ephemeral streams once funneled rain into seasonal springs. From one eroded ledge, you can follow a faint track that leads toward the sweeping plains of the Nubian desert. That path eventually connects to ancient riverbeds feeding into Wadi Hawar, and by extension, to the forgotten corridors of prehistoric migration. Archaeologists have found stone tools and pottery shards nearby that hint at human presence spanning millennia. The rock itself becomes a diary, its colors shifting from pale cream to deep rust as iron and silica reorganize. Climbers and dreamers who reach the summit describe an unexpected panorama where distant Nile bends glitter like a silver thread. That line of sight stitches Jebel Shad into Sudan's wider story, a stone punctuation between river and sand. At night, the silhouette becomes a marker for constellations locals name after animals and ancient gods. In the morning light, the same rock seems to breathe, warming layers that release the dry, sweet scent of crushed stone. The Rahad River Basin in eastern Sudan cradles an extraordinary seasonal floodplain that transforms dry plains into vast wetlands each year. Do you know the Rahad River floods sweep nutrients from the Ethiopian highlands, and fertilize soils that support ancient flood recession farming traditions called Sahelian agriculture. During the short wet season, the basin becomes a migratory corridor for thousands of water birds and rare fish species that spawn in newly formed channels. Local communities read the river's rhythms like a calendar, timing planting, grazing, and fishing to the pulse of the floods. Hidden groves of doom palms and riverine acacias line braided channels, creating shaded refuges for monitor lizards, baboons, and elusive antelope. The Rahad's seasonal islands also provide nesting grounds for pelicans and herons, turning the basin into a temporary floating city of birds. Far from being isolated, the Rahad links to the Blue Nile system and to neighboring Dinder floodplains, forming a network that shapes regional hydrology. When upstream rains fail or dams alter flows, the whole mosaic collapses, showing how delicate this interconnected system truly is. Archaeologists have unearthed stone tools and pottery along the Rahad, evidence that humans have relied on its pulses for millennia. Those same banks still hold living traditions, seasonal markets, boat carpentry, and songs that mark the river's arrival and retreat. Conservationists now warn that climate shifts and upstream development could truncate the flood pulse, imperiling fish migrations and the flood recession farms. Yet local initiatives are experimenting with community-based water management that seeks to preserve both livelihoods and the basin's fragile ecology. In the next segment, we'll travel downstream toward where the Rahad's waters mingle with larger Nile arteries and meet the human stories shaped by these currents. Discover how one small seasonal stream becomes the lifeblood for entire communities, wildlife corridors, and ancient cultural practices that survive each flood. El Dindir's floodplain transforms each rainy season into one of Africa's rarest living mosaics, where river channels weave through islands of acacia and marshland. Do you know El Dindir Game Reserve shelters a migration corridor that links the Ethiopian highlands to the Sudanese plains, guiding elephants, antelopes, and countless birds on ancient routes few outsiders have ever followed? Here, shimmering water turns dry savanna into a cathedral of reeds and flooded grasslands, and hippos lays where last season barely saw rain. Lions and leopards slip through tamarisk groves at dusk, stalking into pools where Nile crocodiles wait, like weathered statues. Hundreds of migratory and resident bird species find refuge in the floodplain. Creating soundscapes that dense, they rewrite a traveler's sense of silence. Local communities have lived with these rhythms for generations, timing planting and festivals to the flood's arrival and retreat. Conservation here is a delicate choreography, balancing traditional grazing, seasonal fishing, and the needs of wide-ranging predators. Eldin-Deer's wetlands act like kidneys for the region, filtering nutrients and sustaining life downstream, even as pressures mount upstream. Poaching, changing climate patterns, and encroaching agriculture have frayed old migration trails, forcing some herds into unseen detours. But where corridors remain intact, the landscape reveals astonishing recoveries when protection and community stewardship aligned. Walkers in the reserve can still find ancient baobabs scarred by time, their trunks sheltering insects and reptiles that feed the larger food web. Seasonal fires, once feared, now play a role in renewing grasses and encouraging the pulse of grazing animals to return. Scientists mapping connectivity to neighboring Ethiopian protected areas say Eldin-Deer may be pivotal for regional biodiversity resilience. Every river bend here hides a story of survival, of species that have adapted to unpredictability, and people who still read the flood like a calendar. To follow Eldin-Deer is to trace the fragile threads that stitch savanna to wetland, culture to conservation, and past migrations to future hope. This is a place where resilience looks wild, fragile, and uncompromising all at once, and where the next season could rewrite the map of life across an entire region. High above the Darfur Plains, the volcanic peaks of Gebel Mara rise to form one of Africa's few highland refuges. Do you know that the Dariba caldera at its summit holds crater lakes so rare in the Sahel they create their own misty forests and cool springs? From the scorched plains below, the massif appears as a green island, fed by seasonal rains that fall far more reliably here than anywhere nearby. Those rains carve deep gullies and feed torrents that tumble into hidden waterfalls, filling hollows where villages have learned to farm on stone terraces. Ancient farmers shaped the slopes into bands of sorghum and millet, and their hand-built walls still anchor soil where winds could otherwise strip it away. Higher up, pockets of montane shrub and scattered woodlands shelter plants found nowhere else in Sudan, and birds that migrate along forgotten routes. In the Dariba Basin, steaming fumaroles and mineral-rich pools whisper the volcano's past, a reminder that these heights were once molten and alive. Local myths hold that spirits tend the crater lakes, while practical knowledge maps seasonal pastures for herders, weaving between valleys. Walking ancient footpaths, you pass petroglyphs and stone circles that hint at communities who treated these uplands as sanctuary during long droughts. Gebel Mara's isolation made it a refuge not only for people, but for species pushed from neighboring lowlands by heat and grazing. Today, the massif connects the story, from desert plains to the highland water towers that sustain rivers and livelihoods across this region. To understand Sudan's landscapes, you must follow the water uphill into Gebel Mara, where geology, culture, and climate meet in unexpected fragile balance. On Sudan's Red Sea coast, the Tokar Delta is one of the world's rare places where seasonal desert floods meet coral sea tides to create a shifting mosaic of tidal marshes, salt flats, and freshwater channels. Do you know the Tokar Delta can transform overnight after the Gash floods, turning scarlet sands into lagoons that draw tens of thousands of migratory birds and some species found nowhere else in Sudan? Mudflats sprout green ribbons of salt-tolerant grasses and tiny mangrove pockets that cradle juvenile fish and crustaceans. Flamingos, waders, and terns converge on the shallow pools, feeding in curiously coordinated swarms that look like moving sunsets. Underneath the reeds, brine shrimp and halophyte plants create a food web, resilient to both fresh pulses and saline tides. Local Beja communities have built centuries of knowledge around this rhythm, timing planning, grazing, and fishing to the delta's pulse. Salt pans glitter where seawater evaporates, producing livelihoods, while also revealing fossil shells and ancient shoreline lines. The delta's seasonal floods once carried silt that fed inland farms across the Tokar Plain, linking wetland and agriculture. Today, upstream changes and climate shifts threaten that flow, shrinking marshes and altering the delicate balance between fresh and salt. Conservationists warn that losing Tokar would ripple along the Red Sea corridor, diminishing reefs, bird migrations, and coastal fisheries. Yet pockets of sanctuary remain, where scientists find rare halophyte communities and juvenile coral fish, shielded by muddy estuaries. From these quiet marshes, the narrative of Sudan's Red Sea unfolds toward nearby Suakin, Port Sudan, and the offshore reefs. Each tide-bound season in Tokar leaves a footprint on the coast, an invisible thread connecting desert mountains, river valleys, and coral gardens. Tracing that thread reveals an ecosystem everyone assumes is barren, but is in truth one of Sudan's most secretive lifelines. In the following segments, we'll walk those channels, meet the people who read the tides, and follow the birds that map Sudan's coastal highways. The Tokar Delta will show us how water, salt, and sand can shape an entire nation's coastal heartbeat. Understanding Tokar is not just a natural history lesson. It's a key to how Sudan's Red Sea future will be decided. Hidden deep in northern Sudan, the Merowe Desert Dunes arch into one of the planet's rarest dune seas, where wind-sculpted ridges stretch like frozen ocean waves across an ochre sea. Do you know that the Merowe Desert Dunes hold linear star dunes unlike almost anywhere else, formed by shifting multi-directional winds that create towering comb-like shapes called seif ridges and star arms? At sunrise, these dunes glow copper and rose, but by night, they become a silent topography of shifting constellations and ancient footprints. Archaeologists and travelers have found stone tools and rock art buried between the ridges, hints that human stories were carried and concealed by sand for millennia. The dunes also shelter surprising pockets of plant life, where groundwater wells up along ancient subterranean channels, creating mini oases that sustain foxes, Dorcas gazelles, and migrating birds. These green threads connect Merowe's sands to the nearby Nile Valley, where seasonal floods once stitched life across deserts and formed trade corridors for Pharaonic and Nubian civilizations. From dune crest to riverbank, the landscape reads like a palimpsest of climate shifts, wet faces, desiccation, and human adaptation, etched over thousands of years. Local communities still interpret the land through oral lore, naming particular ridgelines and wells as markers of ancestral journeys and survival strategies. Today, the Merowe Dunes face new pressures as modern development and climate change alter wind patterns and groundwater recharge, shifting delicate balances beneath the sand. Conservationists are mapping microhabitats and rethinking how to protect the hidden biodiversity trapped between the crests while honoring local knowledge. As you trace a single dune from its sharp lip to its gentle lee, you can read wind histories like tree rings and imagine how each gust wrote a new chapter. This is a place where geology, ecology, and human memory intersect, and where the smallest grain of sand can carry a continent's forgotten story. Walking the dunes at dusk, you hear the sand whisper and sometimes catch a glint of ancient pottery shards half swallowed by time. Small proofs that civilizations once threaded these winds. In the next segment, we will follow one such artifact from dune to dig site, unraveling how Merowe's shifting sands preserve and conceal the human past. Arouse Marine Reserve harbors one of the Red Sea's most resilient coral complexes, thriving where temperature and salinity push life to extremes. Do you know Arouse Marine Reserve is also home to seagrass nurseries that support endangered dugongs and nesting hawksbill turtles? Beneath the glassy surface, gardens of brain corals and delicate plate corals form labyrinths that shelter hundreds of fish species. Elongated porcupine fish, vivid lionfish, and shoals of glassfish weave through sponges and anemones in living mosaics. Local fishermen still navigate these reefs, using knowledge passed down for generations, linking human lives to the rhythm of tides. Their seasonal boat trails trace corridors that connect Arus to the larger marine tapestry of Dungona Bay and the ruins off Suakin. Scientists diving here discover surprising resilience. Corals that bleach less severely than expected, and fast-recovering reef pockets. These refuges give hope for conservation strategies that could be exported across the Red Sea and beyond. Arouse's mangrove fringes stand at the waterline, filtering sediments and anchoring carbon in dense root networks like living blue carbon vaults. In winter months, migratory birds pause on these salt flats, creating a seasonal chorus above the underwater silence. Underwater archaeologists have hinted at submerged stonework and shipwreck fragments that suggest millennia of maritime traffic along this coast. Each artifact ties Arouse's East's natural riches to ancient trade routes that once linked Africa with Arabia and the wider Indian Ocean. Protection here blends science and community, with local stewards leading reef patrols and coral restoration experiments on damaged patches. Visitors who respect those rhythms can witness juveniles darting from seagrass to reef, a live lesson in ecological interdependence. From Arouse, the current carries life north toward Dunganob's protected waters, forming a living highway of larvae and nutrients. Follow that highway, and you find Swakin's red-stained coral islets and the human stories written along them. Conserving Arouse means preserving a rare convergence of biology, culture, and history that most maps simply don't reveal. Stay with us as we move from its shimmering shallows to the ancient stones that tell a different chapter of Sudan's maritime past. Hidden in western Sudan, the Tagabo Hills form one of the world's rare inland columns of volcanic basalt, rising like frozen flames from the savanna. Do you know the Tagabo Hills shelter bizarre mushroom-shaped tors and secret freshwater springs that have sustained communities for centuries? From a distance, they look like scattered castles, their dark ribs carved by millennia of wind and rain. Locals tell stories of ancient artisans who used those hollows as natural granaries and ritual chambers. Walking among the rocks, you feel the geology change beneath your boots, each boulder a page in a volcanic history few outside Sudan recognize. The formations are not mountains in the traditional sense, but the remnant cores of once fluid lava that cooled into dramatic pillars. Layers of lichen and desert varnish streak the stone in colors that shift with the sun, creating an ever-changing tapestry of ochres and charcoal. At dawn, mist clings to the lowest basins and small oases mirror the sky, drawing birds and nomads alike. This is where human memory and stone meet. Petroglyphs and truncated shelters reveal a continuous occupation stretching back centuries. Archaeologists and herders have both left marks here, and the hills act as a quiet archive of survival in a harsh region. From Tagabo, the landscape folds into distant dune seas, and if you follow the old trading tracks, leads toward the Nile's ancient crossroads of Meroe and Jebel Barkal. Those routes converted the Tagabo Hills from isolated outcrops into waypoints on stories of trade, faith, and migration. Yet the Tagabo's real wonder is how such intimate geology shaped culture. Songlines and place names written to the rhythm of rock and water. Local guides will point out hollows used for grinding grain and crests that mark seasonal grazing patterns, living maps etched in stone. Preserving this fragile landscape now means balancing pastoral life with growing pressures, and each footprint feels consequential. Walk here, and you begin to understand Sudan, not as a single image, but as a tapestry of hidden micro-worlds where geology dictates fate. In the next section, we'll move from these granite chapels of Tagabo toward the flooded palms that fringe the White Nile, following the invisible threads that bind Sudan's wild places together. Where else does the Nile carve such stubborn granite as it does through Sudan, where six-storied cataracts interrupt the river with teeth of rock and boiling white water? Do you know the Nile River cataracts, the six great rapids stretching between Aswan and Khartoum? Once acted as natural customs, forcing ancient boats to unload, trade routes to bend, and kingdoms to negotiate access east. These cataracts are not just obstacles, they are sculptors of landscape, creating narrow channels, hidden pools, and islands that harbor unique plant and bird communities. At low water, the exposed basalt and granite form stepping stones across the Nile, a pattern that shaped the placement of settlements, from Nubian villages to the royal cities of Kush. Traveling downstream, you can trace how the cataracts slowed invaders and guided traders toward riverbanks, rich with fish and fertile floodplains. They stitched together distant places, from the sandstone quarries used for ancient temples to the sandy thresholds of the Nubian desert, by forcing human ingenuity to adapt. In the shallow eddies, fishermen still use nets and ancient reed boats, a living link to the crews that once hauled cargoes past the rapids. Archaeologists have found relics on the rocky islets, pottery sherds, anchor stones, and caravan markers that tell of a ceaseless river commerce. The most famous cataracts became landmarks on maps drawn by explorers and geographers, their names whispered in the tales of pharaohs and medieval traders. From those rocky breaks, the Nile throws out tributary arms that feed palm-lined oases and the buried ruins of trading posts that connected Sudan to the Red Sea. Look closely, and you can see how the water's force carved miniature gorges where crocodiles sun themselves and where migratory birds find reed refuges. During the flood season, the cataracts roar into life, lifting the rivers to levels that recharge farmlands downstream and rewrite where people plant and harvest. Modern bridges and ferries have mellowed some challenges, yet the cataracts remain cultural thresholds, places where languages, songs, and meal recipes blended over centuries. Their rocky silhouette still frames desert horizons and signals the transition from the arid uplands to the life-bearing flow of the main Nile. To follow the cataracts is to follow the invisible threads that tied together Kushite pyramids, Nubian markets, and the bustling confluence at Khartoum. And as you move beyond the sixth cataract, the river opens again, revealing how these rugged interruptions were essential chapters in Sudan's long river story. Beneath the ochre dunes of the Nubian desert lies an underground spring that fuels Sudan's Al-Dabaa desert oasis. Do you know Al-Dabaa harbors palm groves fed by fossil waters that attract birds unheard of this far inland? That hidden aquifer creates mirror-like pools where desert heat folds into shaded microforests. Locals still follow ancient irrigation terraces here, a living technique passed down through caravans and kings. The oasis is a stop on a ribbon of life that ties the Nubian desert to the Nile's mainstream. Migratory storks and herons map their flight by these small wetlands, resting before the long river crossings. Clustered mud brick huts and date presses at Al-Daba speak to a human story older than modern borders. Pottery shards and rock engravings near the palms whisper of traders who once moved gold and ebony through these sands. Walk a few kilometers, and the sand gives way to petrified riverbeds that hint at ancient Nile detours. Those detours eventually channeled life toward the ruins of Meroe, linking oasis life with Sudan's forgotten kingdoms. In contrast to the monotone desert, Al-Daba's night sky reflects in still pools, doubling constellations. Bedouin tales told under those stars describe secret routes that connected this oasis to the Red Sea trade. Scientific teams come here to study endemic fish species surviving in isolated waterholes, relics of wetter epochs. Their findings suggest small ecosystems like Al-Daba are crucial reservoirs of genetic diversity for the Sahara. Visiting the oasis feels like stepping into a suspended chapter of Sudan's environmental history. From here, the story threads outward to riverine forests, archaeological ruins, and the far reaches of the Saharan plains. What looks like a modest pool on a map turns out to be a crossroads of ecology and culture. And the more you learn about Al-Daba, the more the desert reveals its hidden, stubborn life. In the next segment, we'll follow that ribbon north toward Dongola and the ancient Nile fortresses. But first, linger on the palm shadows and imagine how one drop from this spring has shaped centuries. Beneath the waves off Sudan's Red Sea coast lie coral formations older than many civilizations. Do you know that the Dahlak archipelago off Sudan's coast hosts entire coral atolls and mating grounds for whale sharks rarely seen elsewhere? From Port Sudan's bustling docks, the coastline unfolds into turquoise shallows dotted with secret islands. Invisible from most travel guides, Sanganeb National Park shelters a submerged pinnacle reef that supports one of the densest coral communities in the western Indian Ocean. Divers who thread its channels find gardens of brain coral, giant clams and reef fish that navigate by currents shaped by the Red Sea's unique salinity. Shoreline villages like Suakin tell a parallel story, where Ottoman brick ruins sit opposite mangrove patches that cradle juvenile fish and migratory birds. Further along, the Dahlak Islands open into an archipelago of empty beaches, tidal flats, and flocks of flamingos that feed on the rich seafloor. Local fishermen still use age-old dhow routes that link these islands to the mainland and to ancient caravan trails stretching back to the Nile. The Red Sea's clarity reveals shipwrecks and coral tombs that historians and marine biologists study together. Each wreck is a time capsule that connects Sudan's maritime past to inland kingdoms whose goods once passed through these ports. Moving from reef to shoreline, you encounter salt pans and seasonal mangroves that act as nurseries for the Gulf's most vulnerable species. Conservationists worry that rising temperatures and unregulated development could sever the fragile chain linking reef, island, and desert ecosystems. Yet community-led initiatives are restoring seagrass beds and reviving traditional fishing practices that sustain both people and predators. Follow the tidal maps and you'll see a living corridor where whale sharks, rays, and turtles thread between feeding grounds and breeding cays. Their stories will show how migration routes of fish mirror human histories, weaving seafaring knowledge with modern science. By the end, you'll understand why protecting this narrow strip of sea is vital, not only for Sudan, but for the entire Red Sea basin. The next chapter begins at dawn, when the first light paints Port Sudan's quay, and the sea still keeps its deepest secrets. Suaki's coral reefs shelter massive table corals that grow in near-perfect rings, a formation found in only a few places on Earth. Do you know Suakin's coral gardens are threaded around the derelict brick piers of the Ottoman-era island, creating an underwater city where coral and ruins entwine? Beneath the glassy Red Sea surface, forests of branching acropora and bulbous porites build labyrinths that host turtles, hawksbill populations, and schools of multicolored reef fish. This reef band acts as both nursery and highway, connecting Suakin to the offshore atolls of Dungonab and the Sanganeb Reef, forming one of the most extensive coral corridors. along the African Red Sea coast. Scientists now study these corals because many show remarkable tolerance to warmer, saltier water, offering clues for how reefs might endure a warming world. Local fishermen and traditional pearl divers still navigate these same channels, their livelihoods braided with the health of the living reef. From a distance, the surface looks calm, but close up you find hidden caverns carved by coral growth, where octopus and cuttlefish disappear like sogi. The reefs also cradle rare sponge gardens and delicate soft corals that create an otherworldly tapestry of color and texture. Conservationists worry that shipping, coastal development, and warming seas could upset this fragile balance, yet limited access has kept much of Swakeen surprisingly intact. Recent surveys have recorded coral colonies reaching sizes rarely seen elsewhere in the Red Sea, some exceeding several meters in diameter and centuries in age. Dive guides who work the Sudanese coast whisper of vertical coral towers and hidden swim-throughs that rival famous dive sites, but remain almost empty of tourists. Because Swakeen sits on ancient trade routes, its reef history is also a story of cultural exchange, with artifacts and shipwrecks scattered along its edges. Restoration projects now aim to map the reef's DNA, catalog species, and train local communities to manage these waters as a shared heritage. In the next section, we'll trace the human stories tied to these reefs, from pearl divers to marine biologists, and reveal surprising links between past trade and present conservation. Understanding Swakeen's coral world may change how we see both Sudan and the future of coral reefs everywhere. Beneath Port Sudan's surface lies Sanganeb Atoll, one of the Red Sea's only true oceanic atolls and a rare reservoir of coral biodiversity in Sudan. Do you know that Sudan holds more pyramids than any other country? Their steep sandstone silhouettes rising from forgotten sands at Meroe and elsewhere. From Sanganeb's submerged gardens to the crumbling coral stone arches of Swakeen, the coastline tells a story of maritime trade and vanished empires. Crossing inland, the two Niles, white and blue, merge under Khartoum's heat, stitching together the country's deserts, forests, and floodplains into one lifeline. Travel north along that lifeline, and you'll encounter Meroe's necropolises and the kneeling columns of Jebel Barkal, where geology and history stand in stubborn dialogue. Head southeast, and Dinder National Park surprises with savanna herds, riverine forests, and seasonal rain that seem to contradict the map of endless sand. The Bayuda and Nubian deserts conceal ancient trade tracks marked by petroglyphs and the faint footprints of caravans that connected sub-Saharan wealth to Red Sea markets. Across irrigated plains like Gezira, canals and cotton fields reveal Sudan's modern projects, human-made oases that depend on the same rivers that fed pharaohs and kings. What ties these places together is not just water or stone, but people's memory. Nomads, farmers, divers, and archaeologists who read the landscape like a record. Every ruined temple, every coral reef, every river bend carries both an ecological secret and a human story waiting to be understood. If you've come for monuments, stay for the living systems, birds that travel continents, through Sudanese skies, reef fish that recolonize atolls, and grasses that return life to scorched earth. Leave with the sense that Sudan is less a single image and more a collection of hidden worlds, each one demanding careful attention before it changes again.